The thunder of hooves and the clouds of dust masked the true horror unfolding on the outskirts of Silver Creek, Arizona Territory, 1876. Through the haze, the body of a woman bounced violently against the rocky terrain, her wrists bound by a rope trailing behind a galloping horse, while 4 men on horseback followed, their laughter cutting through the desert air like a knife. Zachariah Tucker sat atop his buckskin gelding on a ridge overlooking the scene, his weathered hand instinctively moving to the Colt revolver on his hip. At 28, he'd seen plenty of cruelty in his years as a former cavalry scout turned ranch hand, but this was beyond the pale. He recognized the woman's traditional Apache dress immediately, her long black hair now matted with dust and blood. Her body would not survive much longer at this pace. Without hesitation, Zachariah dug his heels into his horse's flanks and thundered down the hillside. The men dragging their victim were too engrossed in their vicious entertainment to notice him approaching until he was nearly upon them. Zachariah raised his Colt, took careful aim at the rope stretching between the woman and the lead rider's saddle horn, and squeezed the trigger. The report of the gun echoed across the landscape. The rope snapped, and the woman's body tumbled to a stop in the dirt. The 4 riders wheeled their horses around, faces contorted in anger as they recognized the interference. "This ain't your business, stranger." The largest of the men shouted, his hand hovering near his holster. "I'm making it my business," Zachariah replied, his voice steady as he kept his revolver trained on the group. 4 men against 1 woman doesn't seem sporting. "She's just an Apache," another spat. "Found her spying around our cattle, teaching her a lesson." Zachariah didn't flinch. "Lesson's over. Ride on." The standoff stretched for several tense seconds before the leader gave a grudging nod. "Your funeral, mister. These savages ain't got no gratitude." With angry mutters, they turned their horses and rode away, kicking up dust in their wake. Only when they disappeared into the distance did Zachariah dismount and approach the motionless woman. Her face was scraped raw, her breathing shallow. She was young, perhaps early 20s, with high cheekbones and features that would have been striking if not marred by injuries. Zachariah knelt beside her, uncertain if she was even conscious. Her eyes suddenly flew open, dark and fierce despite her condition. She tried to scramble away but collapsed with a sharp intake of breath. "Easy," Zachariah said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I'm not going to hurt you." The woman's gaze darted around wildly before settling back on him. She spoke in Apache, words he couldn't understand, then switched to halting English. "Why?" "Help. Because it was wrong what they were doing," he answered simply. "My ranch is a few miles from here. I can take you there, tend to your wounds." She stared at him with suspicion, but seemed to realize she had little choice. Her body was broken, and she was miles from her people. After a long moment, she gave a slight nod. Gently, Zachariah lifted her onto his horse, mounting behind her to support her limp form. As they rode, he felt her tense body gradually slacken against him as consciousness slipped away. The journey to his modest ranch took nearly an hour. By the time they arrived at the small cabin nestled in a protected valley, the sun had begun its descent toward the horizon. Zachariah's land wasn't much, 80 acres. A cabin, a small corral with a few horses, and a barn, but it was his, paid for with years of hard work after leaving the cavalry. Inside the cabin, he laid the unconscious woman on his bed, hesitating before treating her wounds. There was something deeply improper about undressing an unknown woman, but her injuries demanded attention. Moving as respectfully as possible, he cleaned the worst of the abrasions, bandaged what he could, and covered her with a blanket. As night fell, Zachariah kept vigil from a chair across the room, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest. He wondered about her story, what had brought her to be alone, far from Apache territory, and what would happen when she awoke. Dawn was breaking when she finally stirred. Zachariah, who had dozed in the chair, woke instantly at the sound of her movement. She sat up slowly, eyes taking in her surroundings before landing on him with wariness. "Water," he offered, holding out a tin cup. She accepted it with steady hands, drinking deeply before speaking. "I am Dowanhowee Sanoah." Her English was better than he'd initially thought, accented but clear. "Zachariah Tucker," he replied. "Most folks call me Zach." "Why did you save me, Zachariah Tucker?" He considered her question. "My pa taught me that a man stands up when he sees wrong being done." "That was wrong." Dowanhowee's dark eyes studied him intensely. "Those men, they found me gathering plants near the creek, said I was stealing from their land." "The Harrigan brothers," Zachariah nodded grimly. "They've been pushing boundaries since they moved in last year, claiming water rights that don't belong to them." "My people need those medicine plants," she said. "I am a healer. I was sent to gather them." Zachariah nodded. "Your people, they'll be looking for you." A shadow crossed her face. "No, I travel alone. My band is gone. Disease took many. Others were killed or captured. I lived with my grandmother's sister's band, but I am not truly one of them. I serve as their healer, but I am apart." The solitude in her voice struck a chord in Zachariah. He too had been adrift since returning from the war, unable to settle back into the town life he'd known before. "You need rest," he said finally. "Stay until you're healed. No one will bother you here." Dowanhowee looked as though she might argue, but pain seemed to win out over pride. "3 days," she conceded. "Then I must return." Those 3 days stretched into a week as Dowanhowee's injuries proved more severe than initially apparent. Several ribs were badly bruised, possibly cracked, and the skin on her back had been torn raw from being dragged. Zachariah found himself tending to her with unexpected care, bringing her food and fresh water, changing bandages with gentle hands. For her part, Dowanhowee slowly revealed herself to be not just a survivor, but a woman of remarkable knowledge. She identified the plants Zachariah brought her, explaining their uses, which eased pain, which reduced swelling, which helped fight fever. Her voice grew animated when she spoke of healing, her hands gesturing expressively. On the 8th day, Zachariah returned from checking his small herd of cattle to find Dowanhowee outside the cabin, attempting to draw water from the well. He rushed to help her, but she shook her head stubbornly. "I cannot be weak," she said. "I have depended on your kindness too long." "It's not weakness to accept help when you need it," he replied, but respected her enough to step back and let her work the pump herself, even as he noticed her wince with the effort. That night, as they sat across from each other at his small table sharing a simple meal of beans and cornbread, Dowanhowee asked, "Why do you live alone, so far from others?" Zachariah considered the question, unused to sharing his thoughts. "After the war, the fighting with the southern states, I joined the cavalry. Saw things. Did things I'm not proud of. When my time was up, I couldn't go back to living in town. Too many people, too many questions. Out here, it's quiet. I can hear myself think." "You fought against my people," she stated rather than asked. He nodded, not denying it. "Yes, but I never took pleasure in it, never saw the point in most of it, truth be told. Yet you left." "I left when they ordered us to attack a camp, women, children, old folks. I refused, got discharged." "That was 4 years ago." Dowanhowee's expression remained unreadable, but something in her eyes softened. "My husband was killed in such an attack. My son also." The admission hung heavy in the air between them. Zachariah felt the weight of collective guilt press upon him. "I'm sorry," he said, knowing the words were wholly inadequate. "You did not kill them," she replied simply. "And you saved me. Perhaps the spirits guided you to that place." 2 more days passed, and Dowanhowee grew stronger. She began to join Zachariah in small chores around the ranch, feeding chickens, tending the vegetable garden, gathering eggs. They worked mostly in companionable silence, but occasionally shared stories. Zachariah told her about growing up in Ohio, his journey west after the war. She spoke of Apache traditions, of her grandmother who had first taught her healing. On the morning of the 11th day, Zachariah woke to find Dowanhowee standing outside, facing the rising sun, arms outstretched in what appeared to be prayer. He watched from the doorway, struck by the grace of her silhouette against the pink-gold sky. When she turned and saw him, something passed between them, an acknowledgement of something unspoken growing in the space they shared. "I must leave tomorrow," she said as she approached. "My place is with my people." Zachariah nodded, ignoring the unexpected pang in his chest. "I'll take you wherever you need to go." That afternoon, as they worked side by side repairing a section of fence, the peaceful rhythm of their day was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Zachariah straightened, hand moving instinctively to his gun as he recognized the riders, the Harrigan brothers, and 2 of their hired hands. "Get to the house," he told Dowanhowee in a low voice. To his frustration, she stood her ground beside him. "Well, look what we have here," called the eldest Harrigan as they reined to a stop. "Seems you've taken in a stray, Tucker, the very same savage we were teaching a lesson to." "Your lesson almost killed her," Zachariah replied evenly, "and you're trespassing on my land." "Mighty protective of an Apache whore, ain't you?" the second brother sneered. "Word is you've gone native, Tucker, sleeping with the enemy." Zachariah's jaw tightened. "State your business or move on." "We got reports of missing cattle," Harrigan said. "Thought maybe your Apache friend might know something about that. Her people are known for thieving." "My cattle are all accounted for," Zachariah replied coldly. "And if yours are missing, I suggest you look to your own poor ranching before blaming others." The eldest Harrigan's face darkened. "We don't take kindly to insults, Tucker, nor to men who side with savages against their own kind." "I believe he asked you to leave," Dowanhowee spoke suddenly, her voice steady and clear. "This is his land. She speaks," the youngest Harrigan laughed mockingly, "and gives orders, no less." "Maybe we didn't drag her far enough last time." Zachariah stepped forward, his hand resting on his holstered gun. "This is your last warning. Get off my property." For a tense moment it seemed violence was inevitable. Then the eldest Harrigan gave a cold smile. "Another time, Tucker. But you'd best watch your back and your Indian squaw." With that, they wheeled their horses around and rode away. When they were gone, Zachariah turned to Dowanhowee. "You shouldn't have confronted them." "I will not hide from men like that," she replied, chin raised. "They are cowards who attack when they think there is no one to fight back." Zachariah couldn't help but admire her courage, even as he worried about the implications of the Harrigan's visit. "They'll be back," he said grimly, "and not just the 4 of them." That night they sat before the fire in silence, the threat hanging over them. Finally Dowanhowee spoke. "Come with me." Zachariah looked up, startled. "What? Tomorrow, when I leave, come with me to my people. The Harrigans will not follow us there." "I can't just abandon my ranch," he protested. "For a time only," she clarified. "Until the danger passes. My people will not welcome you easily, but as the one you saved, I can speak for you." Zachariah stared into the fire, considering. The thought of entering an Apache camp voluntarily was daunting, yet the alternative, staying to face the Harrigan's vengeance alone, seemed equally perilous. More than that, he realized with sudden clarity he was not ready to say goodbye to Dowanhowee. "All right," he agreed quietly. "For a time." Dawn found them packing essentials onto Zachariah's horses. He secured his cabin as best he could, though he harbored no illusions about what might happen to his property in his absence. They rode out as the sun crested the eastern mountains, Dowanhowee leading the way with confidence despite her still healing injuries. Their journey took them deep into territory Zachariah had never entered, rugged canyons and hidden valleys that seemed designed by nature to conceal those who knew their secrets. They traveled for 2 days, speaking little, sleeping under the stars. On the second night, as they sat beside a small, carefully contained fire, Dowanhowee began to sing softly in her native tongue. "What are you singing?" Zachariah asked when she finished. "A prayer for protection," she answered, "and gratitude for life." She looked at him across the flames. "You have been kind to me, Zachariah Tucker. This is rare between our peoples." "Maybe it shouldn't be so rare," he replied. Something changed between them that night, a shift as subtle as the changing direction of wind. When they lay down to sleep on opposite sides of the dying fire, Zachariah found himself acutely aware of her presence, the sound of her breathing, the silhouette of her body beneath her blanket. On the third day, they encountered the first signs of the Apache encampment, subtle markers that Zachariah would have missed had Dowanhowee not pointed them out. By mid-afternoon, they were met by 2 mounted Apache warriors who appeared seemingly from nowhere, weapons ready. Dowanhowee spoke rapidly in Apache, gesturing occasionally toward Zachariah. The warriors' expressions remained impassive, but they eventually nodded and turned their horses to escort them. "What did you tell them?" Zachariah asked quietly. "That you saved me from death and offered shelter." "That you are under my protection," she replied. "But be prepared, they will not trust easily." The camp was larger than Zachariah had expected, nestled in a hidden valley with a clear stream running through it. As they rode in, activity halted, all eyes turning to the white man in their midst. Children were hurried inside wickiups, and men moved subtly to place themselves between Zachariah and their families. An older man emerged from a central dwelling, his face deeply lined, his bearing dignified. Dowanhowee dismounted and approached him with respect, speaking in their language. Zachariah remained on his horse, acutely aware of his vulnerability. After a lengthy exchange, Dowanhowee motioned for him to dismount. "This is Nantai, our band's leader," she explained as Zachariah approached. "He grants you guest right for saving my life. You may stay, but you will be watched." Zachariah nodded to the older man. "Thank you for your hospitality." Nantai studied him with piercing eyes before speaking in accented but clear English. "Dowanhowee says you fought our people but refused to attack our camps. Is this true?" "It is," Zachariah confirmed. "A man should be judged by the choices he makes," Nantai said after a pause. "You chose to save one of ours when your own kind would have killed her. This counts in your favor." The first days in the Apache camp were an exercise in careful navigation for Zachariah. He was given a place to sleep at the edge of the encampment and was constantly under observation. The children regarded him with open curiosity, the women with careful distance, the men with varying degrees of suspicion. Dowanhowee moved easily among her people, resuming her role as healer. Zachariah saw her only occasionally, usually when she brought him food or translated conversations. He sensed she was deliberately keeping her distance, perhaps to protect her standing in the community. On the fourth day, a hunting party returned with news that white men had been seen searching the area, men matching the Harrigan's description. The camp grew tense, preparations being made to move if necessary. That night, Dowanhowee sought him out where he sat alone by a small fire. "The Harrigans seek revenge," she said without preamble. "They follow our trail." "I've brought danger to your people," Zachariah said grimly. "I should leave, draw them away." "No," she replied firmly. "That would mean your death. Nanti has sent scouts to watch them. We will know their movements." She sat beside him, closer than she had since they'd arrived. For a long moment neither spoke, the crackling fire filling the silence. "Why did you really bring me here?" Zachariah finally asked. "Your people would have been safer if I'd stayed behind." Dowanhowee kept her eyes on the flames. "When I was dragged behind that horse, I had accepted death. In that moment, I saw my husband and son waiting for me in the spirit world." She turned to look at him. "Then you appeared like a vision, and I was returned to life. I have asked myself why the spirits would do this, why they would send you to save me. And what answer did you find? That perhaps there is a purpose we do not yet understand." Her hand moved to rest lightly on his. "And that I was not ready to join my family in death, because there was still life for me here." The touch of her hand sent warmth through Zachariah that had nothing to do with the fire. He turned his palm up to hold hers properly, and they sat in silence, watching the flames dance. The next morning, Nanti called a council meeting and, surprisingly, invited Zachariah to attend. The scouts had returned with troubling news. The Harrigans had recruited nearly 20 men and were methodically searching the region. It would be only a matter of time before they discovered the camp. "We should move deeper into the mountains," one warrior suggested. "No," countered another. "We fight. We have chosen good ground here." The debate continued until Zachariah spoke. "This is my fight, not yours. Let me go to them. If it's me they want blood," Dowanhowee interrupted. "Yours, mine, any Apache they find. Such men do not distinguish once their hatred is roused." Nanti raised his hand for silence. "The white man speaks with honor, but Dowanhowee is right. The Harrigans will not be satisfied easily." He looked at Zachariah thoughtfully. "You know these men. How would they approach an attack?" Zachariah considered. "They're not soldiers. They'll come directly, probably at dawn, expecting to surprise you. They'll have rifles, but they're ranchers, not marksmen." "Then we will not be here when they arrive," Nanti decided. "But neither will we run." "Zachariah Tucker, if you truly wish to help, we will need your knowledge of how white men think." For the next 2 days, the Apache camp transformed. Women and children were sent to a secure location deeper in the mountains, while warriors prepared for battle. Zachariah worked alongside them, sharing what he knew of tactics and helping devise a strategy that would use the landscape to their advantage. He found unexpected respect growing between himself and the Apache men as they worked together. Many had fought against whites before and recognized in Zachariah a soldier's mind. For his part, he came to admire their ingenuity and discipline. Through it all, Dowanhowee moved between groups, translating when needed, but also preparing medicines for potential injuries. Zachariah noticed she had taken on a different demeanor in the camp, more formal, more restrained. Only when they were occasionally alone did he glimpse the woman he had come to know at his ranch. The night before the Harrigans were expected to attack, Dowanhowee came to where Zachariah sat checking his rifle. Without a word, she took his hand and led him away from the camp to a small clearing overlooking the valley below. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light over the landscape. "If there is fighting tomorrow, many may die," she said quietly. "We've prepared well," Zachariah assured her. "With luck, they'll turn back when they see they are outmatched. Men like the Harrigans do not turn back easily." She looked up at him, her face solemn in the moonlight. "Before battle, my people sometimes speak truths they have held inside in case those words are their last chance." Zachariah felt his heart quicken. What truth would you speak, Dowanhowee? That when you cut the rope that day, you saved more than my life. Her voice was barely above a whisper. You woke something in me I thought had died with my husband. I did not want to feel this. It seemed a betrayal of his memory, but the heart does not always obey our wishes. Zachariah gently touched her cheek. I've been alone a long time, thought that was how I wanted it. Then you came, and suddenly my quiet ranch felt alive for the first time. Under the vast canopy of stars, they moved toward each other as if drawn by an invisible force. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question asked and answered in the same breath. The second was deeper, years of solitude dissolving in the warmth of connection. When they returned to camp much later, walking close but not touching, something fundamental had changed. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. Dawn came with mist clinging to the valley floor, perfect conditions for the Apache plan. The camp appeared abandoned, wickiups standing empty, fires cold. Zachariah positioned himself with a small group of warriors on the eastern ridge, watching through the morning haze as the Harrigan party approached cautiously. As predicted, the ranchers advanced directly into the camp, spreading out to search the dwellings. Zachariah counted 23 men, all armed, the Harrigan brothers at the center. They moved with the confidence of those who expected little resistance. The signal came, a bird call that was not quite right. Instantly, warriors emerged from hidden positions, surrounding the intruders. Zachariah raised his rifle, aiming at the eldest Harrigan's horse rather than the man himself. The shot cracked through the morning air, followed immediately by a volley of arrows. The horse reared and fell, pinning Harrigan beneath it. Chaos erupted as the ranchers realized their position. "You're surrounded," Zachariah shouted. "Drop your weapons." Several men immediately threw down their guns, raising their hands. Others fired wildly into the rocks where Apache warriors took cover. The Harrigan brothers, however, rallied their most loyal men into a defensive circle. The fighting was brief but intense. 3 ranchers fell to Apache arrows, and 1 warrior took a bullet in the shoulder. Zachariah moved down the ridge, keeping his rifle trained on the diminishing group of resistors. Then he saw Dowanhowee. Despite instructions to remain with the other healers behind the lines, she had come forward to tend to a wounded warrior. She was exposed, and the youngest Harrigan had spotted her. He raised his rifle. Zachariah didn't think, he simply acted, throwing himself forward and firing in one motion. His bullet struck Harrigan's arm, spoiling his aim. The man's shot went wild, kicking up dirt beside Dowanhowee. The battle ended shortly after. With 2 Harrigans wounded and their men either surrendered or fled, the fight went out of them. Nanti approached the defeated group, his bearing regal. "You came to our land seeking blood," he said to the eldest Harrigan, who clutched his injured leg. "You found instead that we are not easy prey. Remember this." "You damned savages," Harrigan began, but his brother silenced him with a warning look. "Take your wounded and go," Nanti continued. "But know that if you return, you will not leave again." Under Apache escort, the surviving ranchers collected their injured and departed, many casting fearful glances behind them. Zachariah watched them go with mixed emotions, relief that the confrontation had ended with relatively little bloodshed, concern that it might not be the end. Dowanhowee found him as the Apache warriors were celebrating their victory. She had been busy treating injuries but came to him with purpose in her steps. "You risked your life for me." "Again," she said. "Seems to be becoming a habit," he replied with a tired smile. She touched the bruise forming on his cheek where he'd fallen in his rush to protect her. "Nanti says the Harrigans will not return. Their defeat was too public. The other ranchers will not follow them again." "And my ranch?" The scouts report it is undamaged. The Harrigans were too focused on finding us to bother with it. Relief washed over Zachariah. Then I can go home. He hesitated, looking into her eyes. The question is, will I go alone? Dowanhowee's expression softened. My place has been with my people, but perhaps now it could be elsewhere as well. 2 days later, after proper farewells and blessings from Nanti, Zachariah and Dowanhowee rode toward his ranch. The journey seemed shorter on the return, filled as it was with conversation and shared glances that spoke of a future neither had anticipated. They found the ranch undisturbed, though in need of attention after nearly 2 weeks of absence. As they worked together to set things right, Zachariah marveled at how natural it felt to have Dowanhowee moving through his home, how the cabin seemed transformed by her presence. That evening, as the sun set over the distant mountains, they sat together on the porch, shoulders touching. "Will you miss your people?" Zachariah asked. "They will always be my people," she answered, "and I will visit them, but I have found a new path." She turned to him. "When I lost my husband and son, I thought my heart was buried with them. I became a healer because I could not be a wife or mother anymore. And now I see that love does not end with loss. It changes, it grows in new directions." She took his hand. "Like a plant that finds sunlight after shadow." Zachariah brought her hand to his lips. "I never thought I'd find peace after the war. Figured I'd live and die alone out here." He looked at their intertwined fingers. "Turns out peace wasn't what I needed. It was purpose, connection." "We have both been given a second chance at life," Dowanhowee said softly. "First when you cut that rope, and then every day since." As twilight deepened into night, they held each other close, two souls who had found each other across the divisions of their time. The journey ahead would not be easy. There would be prejudice to face, challenges to overcome. But they had already survived against impossible odds. In the years that followed, the ranch prospered under their joint care. Dowanhowee's garden of medicinal plants became renowned throughout the territory, and people of all backgrounds sought her healing knowledge. Zachariah expanded his herd and built a larger home to accommodate their growing family, first a daughter with her mother's dark eyes and her father's quiet strength. Then twin boys who ran wild across the land that belonged to both their heritages. The Harrigan brothers eventually sold their ranch and moved east, unable to overcome the shame of their defeat. Other neighbors kept their distance at first, but curiosity gradually overcame prejudice as Zachariah and Dowanhowee proved themselves to be valuable members of the community. Twice yearly, they would travel to visit Dowanhowee's people, maintaining the connection to her culture and ensuring their children knew both sides of their heritage. Nanti, until his death many years later, would greet Zachariah as a brother and tell the story of how a former enemy had become family. On the 10th anniversary of the day, Zachariah cut the rope that bound Dowanhowee. They returned to the spot where they had first met. The landscape had changed little, the same harsh beauty, the same endless sky. They stood together, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder, contemplating the strange twists of fate that had brought them together. "You ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" Zachariah asked. "If I hadn't been riding that ridge that day," Dowanhowee considered the question with the thoughtfulness that characterized her. "The Apache believe that nothing happens without purpose. Perhaps our spirits were meant to find each other, even across the divide between our peoples." As they rode home together in the golden light of late afternoon, Zachariah reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from violence to healing, from suspicion to trust, from loneliness to family. In a land and time where differences so often led to bloodshed, they had forged something remarkable, a love that bridged worlds and created something new from what had been broken. And it had all begun with a single shot, not to take a life, but to save one.